So that was a whistle stop, because I want to keep things to. I give 5 minutes to two people. David Williams, Councillor David Williams, leader of the Green Group in Oxford City Council, who's been a councillor for 25 years, a lecturer and a college manager, governor of 9 schools over the years, 2 colleges and 1 university senate, and he's worked as a primary researcher for the DSU report on training for government. So somebody who knows the business, and he's going to talk about the impact on council planning for school places or free schools and the whole issue of equality in free schools. Okay, David?
Yeah, there's been a debate over the last few years about really hovering between 2 different schools of thought, one on structure of schools and the other one about the quality of education, improving the quality of education. The structure of schools seems to have been the major thrust of the dynamic changes we've seen over the last 15 years or so, with academies, and we now have a tremendous variety of schools within the state sector. We still even have old-fashioned grammar schools, but there is a tremendous variety of different forms. The free school concept is really an extension of the academy concept. We're moving away from involvement with the local education authority. We've got to be very careful about attractive words like free schools. It seems, you know, we want to have a free and open system. But this sort of misuse of the English language, you see with the Health and Social Care Bill, liberating the NHS, and all these sorts of things. When you ask yourself what really is the freedom here, what freedoms are really involved, well, it's first of all the freedom to employ non-qualified staff. That thing about structure and equality. If we're going to start having non-qualified staff, the quality of education will clearly diminish. When I first became a school teacher in 1974, that was the year they introduced the idea that you had to be a qualified teacher. I first went into teaching with just a degree, and I must admit I was really completely underqualified to do what I was doing. That has been an improvement pattern over the last 30 years. But here's a step back. Is that freedom? Flexibility, there's a great myth that these will provide a more flexible system. We now have primary schools and secondary schools who have after-school clubs and extensions of hours. They're all there in the variety of schools that we have, and there's no reason why the existing system can't be adapted to form a more flexible arrangement. I think possibly this restructuring, if you look at it, a lot of it is to do with what we call meeting parent needs, but some of it actually is just going on to reducing schools to looking after the children. We have here in Oxford, we have a situation where they're pushing for a free school with a local business property developer who's saying that it should be open 51 weeks of the year and start at 8:30, etc. He's lauding the fact that he can read the statement. Mr. Reid, owner of Banbury Property Company, Lumar Developments, said he wanted to recruit university students to teach and oversee sports sessions and teaching processes. That's a sort of backward step in terms of developing quality education. The problem, when we say, how do you develop educational quality? It's a very complex issue. Little broad stroke brush things or simple narratives don't really work because it's a very complex issue. The LEAs, when they were pushing forward, were clearly one of the major elements in doing that. The quality of teaching and learning is really the central element, but LEAs had an important role in stimulating cooperation between schools, in developing in-service training. That's clearly a very important aspect of improving quality in schools, and restructuring so that there was devolved responsibility in terms of finance of schools. We have local financial formulae within particular schools, but trying to keep some sort of equity between the affluent areas of the schools and the poorer areas, and perhaps redistributing money at that level to try to help do that. that, I think, was a social justice aspect of the local authorities. The idea of them being close and democratic free schools, close to parents, well, actually, we do have governing bodies in primary and secondary schools, and all of those have parental involvement, and most of them have parent-teacher associations. And of course, with them being part of the education service, you get education integration with things such as the adult education service. They're able to use some of the property and get involved with making it a complete service, cradle to grave, in a way that isolated individual schools perhaps can't. I think we've seen, I was working as at the Department of Education and Science as one of their primary researchers doing international comparisons of governance of schools in the late 1980s, just after the 1988 Education Act. We were preparing with senior civil servants the 1992 Further and Higher Education Act at that time. But you could see that from 1988 there was this drift into just talking about structural changes within schools, but not really addressing the central problem, which was funding. The British Education Service, in terms of its funding patterns, compared with almost everywhere else in Western Europe, is on a downward flight. Funding is the key all the way through the system, and it just seems as if the government, central government, has sent out a message from that date that we're not willing to levy the taxes to fund this. We're not willing. There's got to be some way of, you see it in higher education with student fees, some way of passing the burden of the finance to somebody else. So a gradual decline. They haven't been able to do that in the state sector effectively because the vast majority of people simply cannot afford to pay fees for the students. The idea of the local authority was as a dynamic agency to help the quality and development of education. So you get, most local authorities have between, I was chair of education in my local authority for about 9 years, and you saw we had about 18 different services which we gave to schools, but most of them have between 12 and 18 different provisions. For example, inset training for and all coordinating that between the school psychology service, lots of shared services. For example, we're offering cheap insurance to schools, whether the school burnt down or whether there were compensation claims against the school. By centralising a little bit of money, we could always cope with the claims which always happen and always will be there against schools. That was a big service and advantage.
So wind up and come back later.
There was equitable things as well in terms of curriculum support. We used to produce a lot of materials to help teachers with coping with the national curriculum. Very democratic service as well. Local councillors, parents, teachers at the governing body level were involved and were able to do it. With free schools, I think you're going to get a system where it becomes distant from their local communities. Of the 24 that have been announced now, you have a situation where 17 of them, even though many of them, a few of them are actually, do have a lot of free school meals, but 17 of them are starting to drift with a free, laissez-faire or open system like that into affluent areas. It's inefficient as well, because we know that this first round of free schools have been given 75% extra funding per head of children. We know that from a parliamentary question which was put down. That won't sustain. They can't sustain that because that's totally unfair. Is it socially just? 8 of the 24 are faith schools. You're moving into a situation where more faith controls. We had that with academies. So, but basically, all of them are in an individual situation with the funding base of the schools actually going down. It's, this argument about structures is masking the fact that British education in the state sector is really now grossly underfunded. Quality will be diminished in an argument about structures.
Thank you very much. Dennis. Douglas, sorry.
I'm Doug Wooksell.
Douglas, Dennis, David. Douglas.
I'm a lecturer in music technology at a fairly large further education college in South Essex. I'm the Trade Union National Executive Member on the University College Union, and I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of points. Specifically, sort of this model of governance, talking about democracy and the democratic